Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Irreplaceable Truths. Today, we're really not going to hit too much on the veterinary medicine world. We have more of a introduction to a organization that I'm very happy to be and proud of. It is Atlas Assistance Dogs. It's a nonprofit organization dedicated to expanding access to service dogs for people with disabilities. Provides training and support to create effective service dog teams. It focuses on ethical practices to help individuals thrive with their service dogs. Let me introduce my two amazing guests. First, we have Jennifer. She's one of the founders of Atlas and the VP of Engineering. And she co-founded the organization with her father. She's experienced in animal training and rehabilitation with a very strong background in a field that's basically Japanese to me, which is technology. She's certified in various ethical training methods focused on positive treatment for dogs and handlers. And she's committed to redefining service dog training to benefit a broader community. I also have Molly. She began advocating for service dogs after training her own dog for a seizure disorder that she got while in college. She's passionate about advocacy for disability rights and service dog education, which is actually pretty important because unfortunately service dogs have gotten a bad rap in the last few years. She leads Atlas operations ever since 2017, overseeing trainers, clients, and outreach efforts. But trust me, there are probably at least 100 more jobs that she does for this organization. Her first service dog, Reed, started training in the program for prisoners, but continued to train with her and a private trainer to fit her needs. So welcome. I'm glad you both are with me today. I know I've known you guys for a few months now. Jennifer, can you tell us the story behind your founding of Atlas?
Sure. So Atlas was co-founded actually by my father and myself and another father-daughter team. That other team kind of was also part of running a for-profit service dog, and they shifted their focus back to that. So really, we moved forward with my father and I as the primary founders. Our motivation to found Atlas was really a mix of looking at my involvement in multiple different service dog nonprofits and for-profits, and seeing both the great need for owner trainers to have access to training their dogs at an affordable rate, and the great need to really change the practices around the ethics of training dogs and the ethics of how people are training these organizations. And so with starting Atlas, it was really all about compassion, all about positive training, and all about doing what we thought was best for the client, even if it was a little more time consuming for the organization. We really want to do everything about what's right for the client long term.
So what's your mission statement? And what do you believe that you're able to uphold it?
You would ask me that. So our mission, if you're looking at it, is that we want to fundamentally expand access to assistance dogs. We support people with disabilities to train and certify their own service dogs using only positive ethical training methods. So we really believe that anybody who would benefit from a qualified assistance dog should be able to have one. And in terms of are we doing that and how are we doing that? So yes, I believe we are on that path. We are in our 8th year. We have done everything we have done has been very intentional from the second we started Atlas to look at how do we make this a long-term thriving organization. And so everything we've done has been with a long-term vision in mind and really building the infrastructure that we need, building the teams that we need. And so now this many years in a lot of cases, we've had clients now starting on their second dog, a successor dog. We have clients around the country. With our model, which is pretty unique, we're able to keep the training really, really low cost by leveraging skilled volunteers. And those skilled volunteers get a lot of access to free training from us, which actually helps them in gaining access to a career and service dog training, which is pretty hard to break into. So I feel like
Yes.
we have really built an amazing community of volunteers and clients who are supporting each other and working together to try to support themselves, as well as really being a part of advocacy for the dog thriving and the person thriving.
So, when you say access to service dogs, what's the biggest inhibitor to access?
It's going to vary depending on the person. In a lot of cases, it's time and money and finding the right dog to start with. And so, because you're working with a service dog who is a living being, and the person that is training the dog is a living being, there's always lots of unknowns and variables, and that you kind of never know what's going to go on, especially with somebody's health. And so, for many people, it's finding the right dog to start with, which can be a huge cost barrier as well as just difficult to find. And then from there, it's being able to afford the training support to help you train that dog. For the people where owner training is a viable option, that isn't for all people. For some people, they really need a dog provided by a program who has significantly more training before they can start working with them.
So, I mean, you've been involved in animal training forever. I mean, your stories go back many years. Um, how did you? When did it click for you? Hey, I need to get involved in the service dog world and supporting people with disabilities.
Is volunteering with a service dog org, and learning. I had done dog training just as a hobby. I'd grown up training our dogs, grown up doing agility and different practices with them and obedience, and always just they were who I connected with in my life more than anybody. But then I ended up volunteering with a service dog nonprofit that was fairly young at the time, and helping them develop and learning under them. And there was a really important client that I worked with that I was the person who was able to get through to this dog that everybody had kind of given up on him and didn't think he had the potential. And in reality, he was just being pushed too hard, and the methods they were using weren't right for him. And by shifting to really listen to the dog and working at his pace, we turned him into an amazing service dog for a retired Army colonel who I became extremely close with. And to this day, his family and I are very close. And it really, collaborating with him and seeing the difference that dog made really helped me see how important doing this customized for the person and the dog, and really accounting for what was good for the person as well as what was good for the dog. Um, that really struck home with me and really motivates me to today, that special bond that that team had.
Yeah, and I mean that's the one thing. Obviously, I'm focusing my career towards early career veterinarians, and I just want them to understand. I mean, working with service animals or even working animals in general, police dogs, bomb sniffing dogs, all that, it is very, very rewarding knowing that this this animal truly, truly, truly serves a bigger purpose than just being a companion. Um, Molly, it brings me to you. Could you share a bit about your crazy journey with Reed? How did this bring you to shape what you want to do with advocacy work and lead you to Atlas?
Sure. So, I had Read now for a little over 10 years. I kind of my journey to Atlas and to service dogs is really very different from the majority of service dog trainers out there. I did not grow up with dogs. I knew nothing about dogs. Um, I grew up with cats. Um, but when I was a freshman in college, I got a brain injury and very soon after developed a seizure disorder. And it was really severe at the time. I was having multiple seizures a day, so I had to drop out of college. Um, and there was really very little options that we were figuring out for me. Medication wasn't working, therapies weren't working. But I learned about service dogs. I think it was a friend of mine who was visiting me in the hospital who saw a service dog down the hall and was like, "Oh, Molly, I saw a service dog. You need a service dog." And that kind of got me started on the journey of looking into service dogs and seeing if that would be a right fit for me. Um, but kind of back to the point of barriers and, time and money and what that looks like, a lot of the organizations that I started looking into, I really wouldn't meet the criteria to get a service dog from them. I either wasn't in the right location, or I didn't have the very specific types of disabilities that needed to qualify. Or if I did qualify, I would have had to wait like up to 5 years to receive a service dog. And that just wasn't a realistic timeline for me. I was back living with my parents. I wasn't allowed to walk up the stairs by myself. So something kind of needed to be done really fast. So I started looking into what could it look like to get my own dog and train the dog on my own or with the help of a trainer. And so I was able to find a local training for-profit organization or company that kind of partnered me with a dog that came from a nonprofit. So I had some partial training. And as you mentioned yourself, Reed was raised in a prison program. So he had some started training when I got him. He was 8 months old. And then I continued working with my trainer to really focus the training for me and to meet my needs. And he did really, actually, once I got him, about 6 weeks later, he actually started alerting to my seizures. And thanks to that, I was able to go back to school and kind of go down this journey. And I really quickly became really passionate about just not so much service dogs initially, but just kind of disability rights. I was getting more in tune with the local disability community on campus, and realizing how many barriers were up for people. And I was meeting a lot of people who were interested in service dogs, and wanted a service dog or would benefit from one, but just couldn't get one for all the barriers that we've been talking about. And that's kind of when I started realizing that I wanted to get into this field myself and help more people benefit from a service dog.
Wow. I find it absolutely remarkable, working with animals for as many years as I have, how these animals are able to detect an issue within their owner. Even when they're not trained, they can still tell that there's something wrong. But to see the videos that I've seen of you and Reed working together, it's just it's heartwarming. It's unbelievable. And it kind of also ticks you off in a way, because service dogs kind of been taken advantage of, because now you can buy a vest on Amazon and take them on a plane if you wanted to. You could buy the letter from the doctor online as well. And it's absolutely incredible to watch you guys, the two of you, do what you do. And I absolutely agree with you that it is very, very difficult to match for a service dog. Funds are the number one reason. I think the last I heard of was like 40,000. Does that sound accurate?
Easily
Up to
could be.
40, yeah, up to 40. I think we've seen up to 50,000.
50,000 for a service dog, which is crazy. I mean, that doesn't leave you anything for, unfortunately, now with the cost of care in veterinary medicine. What if the animal gets sick? I mean, that's huge. So do you guys collaborate with veterinarians to ensure health and well-being of these dogs throughout their training and their working career?
Yeah, so in all of our clients, we need to ensure that, during the intake process with our clients, we ensure that their dogs have been seen by their veterinarian. We have veterinarian health forms. So we want to, make sure that the dog is healthy for service work. So we kind of have a standard form that we want the vets to fill out. We require annual health checks and vaccines, and for the dogs that are going to be doing more mobility work and weight bearing tasks, we require x-rays. So that's an area that's also really important to us, and that we're doing some more research on, as well as more information is kind of coming out on safety guidelines for weight bearing tasks, which there really aren't a lot of safety guidelines, like exact guidelines, but there's kind of some more conversation happening in that area.
But as Molly said,
And-
since we are working with owner trainers, in general, people have their own veterinarians. And depending on the resources of that person, they may be going to a clinic where they never know which veterinarian they're going to get. Or they may be in the case that they have a long-term relationship with that veterinarian. And so we do our best to try to explain to the veterinarians, what does it mean to be a service dog? Some of that is in our forms, because that's not something you're learning in vet school, of what kind of work a service dog is doing, what's expected of them. And we're happy to talk to and collaborate with veterinarians. I know that in doing these forms, we have collaborated with multiple veterinarians, both physical therapy specialists and family practice veterinarians, over the years, to get their opinion on what we're asking for and how to word it so that it is as streamlined as possible.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm doing a lot of work on emotional labor in the veterinary field. How involved is the veterinarian in the discussion of retirement of the service animal?
Probably not much at all.
Yeah. And for that matter, this is a conversation that I tried to have with my veterinarian. As you know, Rita's retiring soon. I consider him semi-retired at this point, and I tried to have that conversation with my veterinarian and get my vet's advice, and he didn't really have much input for me, besides, oh, you know your dog best.
And I'm finding I'm getting better advice from a physical therapy specialist veterinarian, in terms of rehab and longer term care for my own dog, who is also semi-retired at this point. Same thing, he's 11. But it's just, I think it's a pretty hard space for people who haven't gone through it to understand what's expected of a service dog, even not a mobility bearing dog, who might be coming, and especially with us who present a lot, coming to conference after conference, where they're on for 15 hours at a time, traveling on planes, walking on lots of hard concrete, sleeping on hard floors. That it's a lot. Yes, they get to be with us and we get to be with them, but that also means they have to be with us. And I think a lot of people don't understand, veterinarian or not, the mental and emotional toll on a dog. And as they age, they have a lot less capacity for that mental and emotional toll, as well as physical.
Yeah, that it's interesting you said that, because I just had a question I thought of from Molly, which is, will Reed really know he's retired?
It's really, so many people ask me that. It's kind of the question I've been getting a lot, and especially as I'm in the process of training a new puppy, it's that question of like, well, yeah, when did the rules shift? And to be honest, I'm not sure. I'm kind of discovering this as I go along, so it's a learning process for me as well. I know that Reed is definitely at a place right now where he's not as happy being out in public all the time and traveling. And so that's my decision around retiring him definitely has to do around his stress levels, and making sure that he's comfortable and happy. He still alerts me. He still helps me when I have a seizure at home and does his job wonderfully. I don't expect that to just magically shut off. We did have one incident where he like alerted me in the way he would alert me to a seizure, but I realized after the fact that it was just because there was a fly in the room. So, and that had never happened before. So it is one of those things where, you know, old man brain is kicking in.
Yeah, grandpa.
So yeah,
Grandpa's in the
grandpa
house.
brain is coming, you know. So it's not a one day to the next thing where it's like, yay, retirement party, you get to just move to, you know, go to the beach and chill out. but it's kind of a slow transition process. And if, if he does eventually stop alerting me, I'll just kind of have to accept that when the time comes.
I promise you, he's going to, knowing animals as long as I have, he's always going to be alerting you. He will always be alerting you. Now, he might be alerting you, like you said, because there's a fly in a room, or, he might not really know what he's doing, but he's still going to be doing everything he can for you because of that bond you have and the trust that you have shown in him and he's received from you. Just because the way you train them, it was a very trusting training practice that you guys have that we'll talk about in a little bit. Molly, you mentioned that people thrive with their disabilities, not in spite of them. Can you talk more about how a service dog empowers people and foster this belief?
Sure. And yeah, this is something that, I say and that we, like to say a lot at Atlas and that we really believe, but that I also want to make sure it's important. It's not something that every disabled person feels. So that's also important to recognize. And, for me, that sentiment is really strong because I know so many people would tell me like, oh, look at everything you've done despite your seizures. It was that word despite, it really was very strong, and felt kind of belittling. And it's like, no, all the things that I've done and that I do every day are not despite seizures, not despite chronic pain. It's just a part of my day to day, and having a service dog allows me to do all these things. And I think for a lot of people, that's the case. We're not, again, not everyone, but a lot of people are not, living life despite their condition, but it's with them on their day to day. They've learned in whatever way works best for them to manage it, to accommodate their needs. And a service dog can be a really big part of that. So, there's all kinds of accommodations that exist for disabled individuals, and a service dog can be a really, really big part of that, and thriving and doing things that you may not have thought were possible before, but that actually are.
Well, I mean, obviously, with all that importance, Jennifer, since you started Atlas, I mean, you've obviously seen the quote unquote service dog landscape change a lot, right? So, first off, what are some of the misconceptions for service dogs? And then how do you have your clients become advocates for themselves and their service dogs with those misconceptions that are out there?
And I think it's ironic that as more and more people have discovered just how much service dogs can do and what a broad range of what they can do, is where we've seen kind of such an explosion of so many dogs out there who may or may not have the training they need. And so it's the irony of their success that's also causing challenges. And where we've seen things change a lot has been going from organizations that primarily provided dogs to people with disabilities, and an attitude fairly strongly from those organizations that people with disabilities could not possibly train their own service dog. And that service dogs had a kind of narrower understanding of what they could do. They were originally used for seeing eye guiding work and the mobility work. And it's really been in the last 10 or so plus years that we're seeing how much more they can do. And then shifting to recognizing they can be any kind of dog. They don't need to be a Labrador or a Golden Retriever. They could be a Chihuahua. A Chihuahua can smell if this person is going to have a diabetic attack. They don't have to be near their face. They're not going to carry a whole lot for them. They're not going to help them with mobility, but maybe they're the right thing for an older person living in an apartment building. And so recognizing any kind of dog with the right temperament could be a service dog, recognizing the huge range of types of things they can do, and then recognizing that people can train their own dogs, or the variety of kind of people that can help with training service dogs is huge. So as that has expanded, in the United States, protection for teams with service dogs is governed by the American with Disabilities Act. It's extremely broad. This is both good and bad. It says if you are someone with a disability, which is really up to you as the individual, which is something that significantly impacts your life day to day. If you have a dog who is well-mannered in public and housebroken and has been trained to do one thing that directly mitigates that disability, you have public access rights to take them most places in public. There is no proof in terms of misconceptions. There is no requirement they be trained by an organization. There's no requirement they wear a vest. There's no requirement they have an ID card. There's no requirement they be a specific breed, or have specific known tasks. They just have to meet that criteria. And all the public can ask you are two questions. One, is that a service dog? And two, what tasks have they been trained to do for you? They're not allowed to ask you, quote unquote, what's wrong with you. They're not allowed to ask you about your disability. And you don't have to have any documentation whatsoever. And this is really misunderstood. And this open access is wonderful, and that there are a lot of people who don't have access to program provided dogs or to money to work with organizations, or they're doing the best they can with a dog who's partially meeting their needs. So it guarantees that access to everybody. However, it does mean that it is easy for people to take advantage of and bring dogs out who really aren't appropriate as service dogs. The person may or may not need them to be performing that work. But we don't know. And I like to give people the benefit of doubt and, recognize that service dogs are also not robots. I think that's another big misconception, because we've seen these stoic German shepherds or kind of dogs trained in older, more aversive styles that are just sort of robotically going through their day. And that's really shifting in the industry. But I think there's this perception that they should be this robotic being, and that's not the case. They're living beings. They make mistakes. They have bad days. They have good days. Under the ADA, it's okay if a dog happens to bark once, if a dog happens to get distracted, as long as their handler is getting them back under control quickly, that's allowed. Aggression is not allowed. Something that's dangerous is not allowed. But the dog doesn't have to be a robot. And so giving that team a little grace of maybe they're just having a bad day. Maybe they're feeding off each other. Our dogs really feed off our emotions and our stress. And supporting them, and then looking at how can we as a society have more access to training and support, so that the people out there with their dogs actually have the support they need. And they also can read the body language of a dog. A lot of people, when we work with them, don't know how to read what their dog is saying. They see a quiet dog in a public setting. They don't recognize that as a shutdown stress dog. And so helping people understand that, so they recognize where they should or shouldn't bring that dog to help support them, I think is also a really big part of this.
Well, I mean, I have some thoughts and questions off what you just said. I mean, first off, for the veterinarians listening out there, if a dog comes in with the service vest on and it tries to bite you, chances are it's not well-trained service dog, and it's truly not a service dog. I was walking down the beach a couple weeks ago with my wife, and this lady was walking some mixed breed dog that had a service vest, and that dog literally was trying to jump and bite kids. It tried to jump on another dog, and my wife told me just to shut up. She was like, don't get involved, because I was about to say something. But that's truly not a service dog. So, Molly, have you... No, well, a lot of people have service dogs now because they need it for anxiety, or not even, like social support, or whatever they usually say. But I mean, still, would you want to sit next to that dog on an airplane?
Absolutely
No,
not.
and that dog doesn't belong on an airplane. But I think that's part of, I think, and this is, and what you're saying, Gershon, is really valid, right? And I think but part of, I think, kind of where we're Jen's comment of giving the person the benefit of the doubt, because we don't know what's going on with the person. It could be that the person with that dog that had the vest and that was biting, that's definitely not service dog behavior, and that's not appropriate for that dog to be representing a service dog. However, can we say that that person isn't legitimately disabled, doesn't have a need for a service dog? We don't know that. So it can be really easy as an onlooker, and even me, I'm completely, I'll do this sometimes. I jump to conclusions, I judge, and then I kind of have to check myself where we don't know what's going on. But it could just be that person really could benefit from training support, or maybe that dog is just never going to be cut out to be a service dog, and that's honestly, a majority of times, that's unfortunately what it is. There's a lot of dogs that just don't have the temperament for service work, and a lot of people are just doing their best and don't have access to the proper support and resources and do what they can with their dogs, but the dogs don't have the appropriate skill level or temperament. But when we jump to conclusions and say, oh, that dog's a fake, that person doesn't need a service dog, we can't say that because we don't know what's going on in someone's life. We don't know if someone's disabled or not, and it makes it really difficult on people with service dogs. We've seen it in our clients, the huge amount of anxiety in our clients who are now terrified of going out in public if their dog is not 100% of the time perfect. I mean, I have those days more and more too, where, I mean, for the past few years, really, where it's been, if my dog has one moment of slight imperfection, what's the public going to think? Are they going to look at me and think I'm faking, my dog is faking, I'm misrepresenting? And we're seeing so much anxiety amongst our clients who are now terrified of going out in public. And it's already difficult to go out in public when you're disabled. So this is just adding on that layer.
And to be clear, we are not in any way advocating to accept aggression in service
Absolutely
dogs.
not.
No.
For people with working dogs, that it can take one attack from a dog to completely destroy that working dog's career. And so it is a real problem. But in your example, that dog could be serving someone at home as an in-home service dog, but they shouldn't be taking them out in public. It's not appropriate for that dog in public. And when Molly and I are talking about having a bad day, we're not talking about that as an example.
Yeah.
We're talking about, oh, they're sniffing around where we don't really want them sniffing the ground. Or maybe they picked up a French fry when they've been trained for years to not eat off the ground. Or maybe they get a little more distracted, or their pace isn't as perfect. We're not talking about anything that would put the public at danger.
And that was kind of the point I was going to drive home, because who knows, maybe 100 people saw this dog's behavior, and all of a sudden the whole concept of service dog in the back of their mind is most of them are fake. And that's unfortunately, I would feel something that Alice is running up against a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And especially for invisible disabilities. And if you have a non-typical breed, if you are somebody in a wheelchair or have mobility aids, or you have a typical breed, then there's a lot more acceptance. But if you are someone who otherwise looks healthy, we recently had one of our clients traveling internationally who was told, you're too pretty to need a service dog. Not knowing anything about her underlying health conditions.
So how do you coach your clients to get around that?
A lot of practice. And especially if you think about clients many of whom have social anxiety already, and their dog is part of helping them enter the world at all, to even have the capacity to, say, go to a grocery store. It's really, really hard to advocate for yourself. It's really hard if someone comes up, even asking the questions they're allowed to ask. Even somebody coming up that says, is that a service dog, could cause a complete panic attack for people with pretty severe anxiety disorders. And so it's lots of coaching. It's lots of working with them on the exact language. It's helping them have tools like cards they can hand out that explain their rights, helping them understand when they don't have to self-advocate. If they're like, you know what, I don't feel like being at the store today. Today is not the day I want to put on my advocacy hat. If I'm going to be challenged, I will go somewhere else. But it's just building that confidence, building their understanding of the laws, giving them tools they can use to educate.
So what are the signs of mental distress or that they're just not having a good day? I mean, you said that they sniff somewhere where they shouldn't. They pick stuff off the ground. Is there other things they do that that these people look for, and that actually, more importantly, veterinarians need to know about?
I mean, I think it's a really important thing. Then we definitely encourage our clients on this, and we do annual recertifications. I think it's really important if you're seeing behavior in your dog that doesn't make sense or that's new. I think it's really important to go to your veterinarian and see if something's wrong. Is something causing pain? Dogs are really stoic and they will just hold in pain a lot. And we don't necessarily know it until we start seeing subtle responses. And so that is definitely one of the first things we do is recommend they go see their veterinarian, have a full physical workup, have a blood panel workup, see what's going on. Some common things we will see will be the dog balking. They're refusing to move. They don't want to do something. They're panting a lot. They may be tucking their tail where they didn't used to. They, things like that. They may be looking away, showing avoidance behaviors, displacement behaviors. And I think it's tricky. Because when a dog is in a vet's office, they're usually already pretty stressed. And so they may be showing a lot of those behaviors. So I think getting videos that the vet can see outside of that, so they can see them in their actual day-to-day context, is important. But it's been pretty common that when we tell people to go to the vet, that they discover, oh, they've got something going on. And if you resolve it, then the dog's temperament adjusts back to their normal happy self. It's just that dogs don't tell us what's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like things I can think of just off the cuff, like obviously as these dogs age, and you're dealing with a lot of doodles now, labradoodles, golden doodles, Bernie doodles. I'm sure is the dog du jour right now. Their thyroid could be acting up. They're prone to lower back pain. And that's the exact thing is that owners or your clients, for me, the owners, they don't realize that dogs do not show discomfort, because animals in the wild, when they show discomfort, they go from top of the food chain to the bottom of the pack, and they have to go find their own food. So they really, really try to hide as much as they can. It's just that veterinarians need to understand that people with a service dog are so in tuned with that animal, they will pick up something well before maybe even a blood work or X-ray would. What type of additional training do you think we should be doing for these veterinarians to be able to pick up on those types of things?
And definitely behavioral. A lot more subtle behavioral body language. And I think a lot more of helping teach clients what that body language looks like. We still see a lot of people who are working with their dogs that are starting our training programs who do not know how to read their dogs. Or we will see teams or people out in public, like your examples of teams that wouldn't be ones that would necessarily make it through our program, but teams where the dog is really stressed and shut down and the person isn't necessarily recognizing it. So even though they may have a very tight bond, the person may not have any idea how to read that dog. And so I think helping people know what to look for, helping people understand gear choices. I know my veterinarian just recently reached out to me because we've had a relationship for over 20 years, and she reached out about harnesses. She said, hey, I'm seeing more and more dogs having shoulder issues. This is my regular vet, not my PT vet, who could have said this 30 years ago. What kind of harnesses do you recommend? But just being part of that conversation, I think being willing to talk about gear. I see very few veterinarians say anything about if somebody shows up in a prong collar or a choke collar, an e-collar. Being polite and compassionate, but being curious and being willing to talk to them about the impacts that could have on their dog. I would love to see more training in veterinarians in there and more like holistic support from veterinarian to a person.
Okay, so let's go to what you both are so passionate about. Let's discuss the training of Atlas service dogs. I know you hate the prong collar. I know I hate the prong collar. Most veterinarians hate the prong collar. Sometimes, though, as we've discussed in the past, if you have that, 220-pound Great Dane come in, that's about the only thing that's going to control that animal for that. Usually it's a 65-year-old, 5'1" lady that comes walking in the door with that dog. So why don't you go over a brief discussion of how you recommend or how Atlas goes about training their animals?
And I want to comment on what you just said, because I think that's something where the positive reinforcement community can miss the mark a lot of times, especially people with disabilities, is that it's not uncommon to see people without a lot of support of an organization or owner trainers with their dogs in prong collars because they are scared for their safety. And I think it's really for the safety of the person. They're scared of being pulled over. And I think it's important to meet these people with compassion and recognize most people don't want to hurt their dogs and that they have a legitimate reason to be concerned, and to meet them without judgment, and then help them learn other tools that they could use, such as possibly a gentle leader. There's other things that they could use, and looking at, long term, are these the right matchings of a dog and a person? But I do think it's really important to meet them with grace rather than meeting them with equal judgment and hatred and saying, oh, you're so evil. But fundamentally, the idea of positive reinforcement training is we are reinforcing the behavior we want, and we're redirecting or ignoring what we don't, and helping the dog know what to do. Pain and punishment tells the dog what not to do. It doesn't tell them what to do instead. It can be effective at stopping behavior, which is unfortunately why so many people go to it. It's quick. But it's not effective in teaching what to do instead. And it can create a lot of stress and confusion in an animal when they're now scared of behaving. If the worst thing that happens to you when you try something new is you may not get a cookie that time, versus, well, if I try something new, sometimes I'm going to get shouted at. Sometimes I'm going to get jerked on. Other times, nothing's going to happen. Other times, I'm going to get a cookie. You get a dog who stops being willing to try. You get a dog who stops being as confident. And for all dogs, but especially service dogs, we need dogs that we're asking to be on duty to let someone know if they're going to have a seizure. We're asking them to work around the clock. That dog has to have been reinforced and be thriving from that work. That what you're asking them to do is self-rewarding because it's been reinforced so much. And so it's really important for working dogs, but I would argue ethically important for any dog, to really look at the mindset of behavior happens for a reason. If a dog is doing something, it is serving a function, and it's not ethical for us to expect it to just go away without giving them something else to do instead that meets that need. We can't expect a dog to stop jumping on someone on the door unless we teach them a different way to get that attention, a way that we like too. But it's not fair to just expect behavior to vanish. Living beings exist to perform behavior. Well, I don't know if you would add something in there.
I think you said that perfectly.
Because veterinarians, we do not get trained in animal behavior, in vet school. That's a soft skill. And that's, where my dissertation is how we're missing all the soft skills.
And this would be a field. We have very few veterinary behaviorists in the US. So if you want to convince your veterinary students to go specialize in that, there is a need.
Well, I mean, just because you're a veterinarian doesn't mean you need to be in a clinic. There are many, many, many other avenues you could go. There is one in Orange County. Dr. Goldstein, she had her PhD in psychology, and then went to vet school, and now she's a veterinary behaviorist. Used to have great conversations with her because, again, when I was talking about animal behavior, it's, unfortunately, we only know what we know. And unless you really were into training as a younger student or as a younger child, you're not going to know much, Positive reinforcement, clicker training. So you are a fan of the Gentle Leader?
I will caveat that strongly. So I think that the Gentle Leader can be a good training tool and a transition tool to help move people from other more controlling or aversive devices. However, it is very easy to hurt a dog in a Gentle Leader. It is very easy for someone, if they don't understand how to fit them and how they work, if you pull on a dog in a Gentle Leader, you were really risking their neck. And so they are not something I would recommend to just say, oh, here, go casually throw on a Gentle Leader. However, they are a very good, when you're looking for an option to help shift somebody who's scared, or who's working with a size difference in their dog, it does give you a lot more control. And then you can work with them to help teach them and teach the dog, hey, I want to be next to my person. Here's why I want to be here, where to be. And you can use that to help them transition to something like a harness, which would be our preferred equipment for a dog.
Yeah, it used to scare the crap out of me when I see veterinary hospitals in their lobby selling Gentle Leaders. It's like, okay, you gotta teach the owners how to do it.
Absolutely. So yeah, they are in our paradigm of tools to use, they are near a last resort for training. And they are something to essentially to make sure that there is a backup of safety if the person is so vulnerable and so frail that if that dog accidentally even once got excited by a squirrel, that person could get pulled over and have life-threatening damage. As an organization, in that case, we still want the dog trained to do all their work without a Gentle Leader, but we may accept the person having that as a safety backup for their own safety, but that's not how the dog has been trained. But again, when done well, it can be a helpful transition tool, especially if you have exuberant young dogs and more fragile people, or bigger dogs and more fragile people.
Okay, Molly, so I got a question for you because you're going through it again. Can you compare and contrast Reed to the new puppy?
Yeah. Well, the new puppy's 4 months old. So there's that. I got Reed when he was 8 months old.
Well, Reed was still a puppy at 8 months.
Yes, he was.
Reed?
Reed was a puppy at 8 months, but it's hard to remember that he was. I was just having this conversation with my fiance last night, because it's hard to remember how Reed was not always trained. The new puppy, his name is Arlo. It was very fun. He was very cute, but why doesn't he know all the things yet? I'll just kind of leave it at that. Why doesn't he know all the things yet? And this is my first puppy, and I'm not raising him on my own. I have the help of we actually have an Atlas certified trainer who happens to live a few minutes from my house and who volunteered to raise him for me. So we're doing a lot of, kind of co-raising, but he's full-time over at her house, and I, will come over my house on weekends. Because I really don't have with the way my health is, I just can't do a puppy. But it's a whole new learning process of its own, and it's making me learn a lot about myself and training skills that I thought I had, and maybe I don't quite have them down, and there's always more to learn. And I think, as you said yourself, you only know what you know. So it's a fun process.
So, yeah, I could imagine. I could imagine. So, you both bring unique skills to Atlas. What are some of the biggest lessons or growth moments that you can remember?
I don't know that I've had one that I can pinpoint. I think over the past few years, you know, as I said, I was always more of I really wasn't a dog person before. I even after, you know, many years with Reed, I was a Reed person. I wasn't a dog person. I think everyone at Atlas, when I first started, kind of laughed at me because that was kind of the joke. Molly's the only one who's not the dog person. And I've definitely become a dog person. And I've learned so much about dog training and understanding dogs and dog behavior. And I feel like I'm always learning and just getting to be around so many knowledgeable people all the time. So I think for me, just the overall growth has been about just continuously learning more about animal behavior and training, and also just learning more about people and how different types of people work and function, because same with, you know, I have my own disability, but so many different types of disabilities are, you know, affect people differently. So it's just kind of a continuous learning process on both the human and animal side.
And I would say, yeah, the human side is one bit where there's been more learning for me. Not that I haven't learned an awful lot about the animal side, but I think, yeah, just recognizing how to meet people where they're at. And how to keep them moving along on what's a fairly rigorous training plan in our program, and providing support and kind of finding that balance of also understanding very different communication styles and how to work with people who have very different ways of learning than I do. I very much have a techie background, how to be patient with people that really struggle with technology, and look at other ways to do things. So I think it's us always looking as an organization, how do we be as kind as possible? And also be consistent in how we treat people. It's a constant evolution of, you know, I really appreciate our board. I really appreciate Molly and having a sounding board, that we don't very many decisions by ourselves. There's a lot of sort of, what do you think about this? To really look and make sure, is there something we're missing? And if we kind of question, hey, is this quite right? We will ask other people and bring other people in to challenge our perspectives, to really make sure we're kind of thinking big picture and we're not having a gut reaction.
So, with your techie background, can you think of any tech type approaches or innovations that you could bring to Atlas as far as training or matching or anything like that?
I have brought a lot
I
in
was
terms
about
of
to
that.
say she already has.
One of the things that I think many of us learned during the height of COVID was a lot about what we could do virtually. During that time, I figured out a lot of ways to work with our clients that actually work more effectively, taking advantage of virtual technology, even if you're in the same place, using iPods or earbuds or different things to be able to communicate and not distract the dog. Atlas uses pretty sophisticated software in terms of tracking all of our constituents, making sure we're on top of everything we're doing. To allow us, we have 1.5 employees, Molly being our original employee, and we have a part-time admin, and we just started a part-time executive director, independent contractor. Everybody else in Atlas is a volunteer, and yet we manage to do so much. And that's a mix of, because we have awesome volunteers and because we have an infrastructure that we automate as much as possible, to help us scale. And so I would say I have to check myself to not add in too much technology, to not make it too hard for people, while at the same time looking at how do we pick technology that makes it easier on people.
Yeah, I could see AI coming very useful if you're going to write, emails and letters to donors and clients. Don't you agree? Yeah. So looking into the future, what do you hope Atlas's legacy will be in the service dog industry?
I hope we have changed people's minds about who can train a service dog and the kind of dogs that can be a service dog. And I hope we've changed people's minds about the methods that are critical to use for training service dogs, and frankly, the understanding of disability as a whole.
What about you, Molly? Because I know advocacy is so huge for you.
I hope we improve access to service dogs for people who could benefit from one. And that, you know, the people who are getting closed doors, you know, that we're the open door when they call us.
So, for listeners interested in supporting Atlas, what are the best ways for them to get involved?
Well, an obvious one is financial support. As a nonprofit, we charge $900 a month for 9 months or more of private one-on-one training for our clients. As we mentioned earlier, industry prices for that would be closer to $20,000. We intentionally lose money on our clients. We can only do that because of support of our donors. So obviously donating is a huge one. Reaching out if you have connections in your businesses that maybe you might want to partner or promote what we do, or if there's certain skills that you bring that you'd be interested in volunteering. Most of our volunteer opportunities are virtual. Our volunteers that we have work with our clients are called team facilitators. We train a cohort of them once or twice a year. Those are people that have skill in working with dogs, but aren't necessarily professional trainers, though many are. Many of those people also have disabilities. They don't have to, but they can. And so those are some of the obvious, and just being part of advocating for the well-being of working dogs and the rights of people with disabilities. Be part of a positive part of that conversation.
So, I forgot to ask you, when it comes to training the animal, how long is the average length of training?
If you were to start from a puppy, for most people, it takes 2 to 3 years before a dog is really ready to be certified and really reliable, that they've got their adult thinking break about them, that they've got an adult stable body. If you want to do any mobility work, you don't want to do anything like that until they're close to 2 and their growth plates are developed. So for most people, starting from a puppy, it's a 2 to 3 year process. In our program, we start with dogs that are at least 14 months of age and have a basic foundation of obedience. And so in our program, we have found, looking at the data and working with people, that most people can get through that of learning how to self-advocate, learning the disability tasks, learning how to work in the settings they need, with 9 months of focused training plus online training support that we offer.
So you're saying Molly has 18 to 24 months to go.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. Now,
Benefit along the way.
oh, I'm sure. But Reed will still be there. I'm telling you, Reed's still going to be doing his thing. Also, do you provide, let's say I want to train my dog to be a great companion, but not be a service dog. Are those services you offer to people?
We have an online program called our Team Set in Motion course that is not a service dog specific course, but it offers, it can be really beneficial for people who are going to be training a service dog in the future, but it's also a great program for people who just want to train their pet dogs. So it really covers, you know, how to understand positive reinforcement training, gives a lot of skills on a lot of the, you know, good foundation skills that a, you know, puppy would need, adolescent, adult dog, kind of the cooperative care skills. So a lot of just good foundations that any dog would benefit from. So that's one option that we have for folks who would want to work with their pet dog.
So, and how much is the cost of that course? So, if a veterinarian has a client who's interested in training,
That's it's $59.90 for 3 months access to the online course, and that's renewable as often as unlimited renewal.
So I try to keep that as accessible and affordable as possible.
Mhm.
I would say that is pretty accessible and affordable. It's cheaper than the Petco dog trainer.
hmm And while it is online, it does have the ability to send in videos and get interactive feedback as part of that.
Oh, that's amazing. I didn't know you had that option. So if a client is having difficulty with a certain skill, they'll video it and you give feedback on things to try.
Yep, we have, and I mean, throughout the course, there's, checkpoints and kind of video assignments. So that's included within the course anyway, that they're getting that feedback. And then we also have twice a month, there are Zoom office hours that anyone signed up for the course can log into, talk with other students, talk to the course instructors who are Atlas certified trainers. So there's a lot of opportunity for feedback and peer support and just not being all by yourself while you're trying to train whether it's a pet dog or future service dog.
I do want to be clear, the focus is not behavior though.
Mm-hmm.
So with like the skills that we're teaching, it's, am I having trouble having my dog learn to concentrate? Am I having trouble working on basic manners, confidence, training skills? This course is not intended for people that have significant behavioral issues with their dogs.
Yeah, that's an animal behaviorist at that point. Yeah, those are very difficult conversations to have with clients when they have that, dog that all of a sudden is getting aggressive now that there's a baby in the house. And unfortunately, that takes a whole different approach than what you're trying to achieve. So any closing thoughts or reflections about your journey, both of you, and the future that you have for Atlas?
I think Atlas is at a really exciting point in its journey. And I'm really excited to see where we continue to go and grow, and how we can continue to support more people and more dogs. So I'm really proud of everything that we've done as an organization and as a community. And I'm just really excited for what we're going to keep doing.
Agreed. Yeah, just very proud, very excited. And I think talking to veterinarians or potential veterinarians, encouraging you to be curious about what the life of a working dog is, encouraging you to be curious about how do I support people with disabilities. Ask questions. We welcome veterinarians reaching out to us. It is a life-saving partnership.
It is, and it's a very rewarding partnership too, that I was blessed to be a part of multiple times, and it was probably the greatest thing between service dogs, service animals actually, and classroom pets. Those are the two appointments I loved. I love doing that.
So my relationship with my personal veterinarian is 25 years long. That is longer than any of my personal healthcare providers. And I am terrified the day she retires. She's not allowed to retire. And so, that is a incredibly important relationship.
Yeah, it is very, very important that I hope the veterinarians listening to that is that those deep-seated relationships you can have with clients are very important in many aspects, but most importantly, the owners knowing that they have someone that they trust and always can turn to is enormous. And I thank you for saying that, Jennifer, because it's a point that I've been trying to bring home, with all the podcasts. If someone wants to get a hold of you, what's your contact information?
So one of the easy is just info@atlasdog.org. Our phone number is 503-880.
Nope.
Sorry.
Incorrect.
I'll let Molly answer our phone number.
893-8080.
And I don't know, Gershon, you probably assume we'll put up a QR code or other stuff when you actually put this.
Yeah, and then also, last but not least, social media. We're working on it, so we'll be there.
You can follow us on Instagram, on Facebook,
On YouTube.
YouTube, and TikTok is being worked on.
Yes, and I'm very excited.
Newsletter, please. You can also follow and sign up for our newsletter.
Well, I am very excited for what's about to come for you. I'm very, very honored and humbled to be part of this organization and talking to people about it. And I think going forward, you know, if any of the veterinarians listening to this have any questions, please reach out to Atlas Dog. You can reach out to me at drg@vetmedit.com if you have any questions. And just remember, working with a service dog, you're actually helping 2 lives at once, and that can't be more rewarding than that. So I thank both of you for being here today, and we will talk soon.
Around we go, playing that game.